You've met this person before. They talk over the expert in the room. They explain your own job to you. They're loud, certain, and almost always wrong. But the real answer to why this happens is far stranger than simple arrogance. Somewhere in your brain right now, a filter is running. It's the same filter that lets you know when you don't understand something. And here's the strange part. The less skilled you are at a task, the worse that filter works. Think about that for a second. The very knowledge you'd need to recognize your own incompetence is often the same knowledge you're missing. It's not a character flaw. It's a blind spot built into the architecture of thinking itself. In 1999, psychologists David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger ran a series of experiments at Cornell University that would eventually put a name to this pattern. They tested people on logic, grammar, and humor, then asked each person to guess how well they'd done compared to everyone else. The results were almost too strange to believe. People who scored in the bottom quarter, the worst performers in the room, consistently guessed they'd scored better than most of their peers. Not slightly better, dramatically better. The people who understood the least about a subject were often the most confident they understood it well. Why? Because judging your own performance requires the exact same skill as performing the task in the first place. If you don't know what good grammar looks like, you can't accurately judge your own grammar. If you don't understand logic, you can't tell that your logic is broken. The incompetence and the inability to detect the incompetence come from the same missing piece. Dunning later called it a double curse. You lack the skill, and you lack the skill required to notice that you lack the skill. Here's where it gets stranger. This isn't really about intelligence at all. It's about something much older, something that predates classrooms and IQ tests entirely. For most of human history, your ancestors lived in small groups where almost everyone did almost everything. There was no such thing as a specialist quietly correcting your form. If you built a fire wrong, it simply didn't light. If you misjudged a hunt, you went hungry. Feedback was immediate, physical, and impossible to argue with. Your brain evolved inside a feedback loop that punished bad judgment instantly. Modern life removed that loop almost entirely. You can hold a confidently wrong opinion about economics, nutrition, or geopolitics for years without ever facing a consequence sharp enough to correct it. Nobody starves because they misunderstood inflation. Nobody gets mauled by a lion because they misjudged a historical fact. The ancient system that once forced accuracy has gone quiet, and confidence has been left to grow unchecked in the silence. That mismatch has a name too. Researchers sometimes call it evolutionary discordance, the same gap that explains why your body craves sugar in a world of endless snack aisles. Your instincts were built for a world with sharp, immediate feedback. You now live in a world where feedback can be avoided almost indefinitely. So what does the opposite look like? What happens to people who actually know a subject deeply? This is where Dunning and Kruger's data takes its strangest turn. The most competent people in their studies didn't overestimate themselves. If anything, they slightly underestimated their own performance compared to others. Experts assumed that if a task felt easy to them, it probably felt easy to everyone. They projected their own competence outward and assumed the room was just as sharp as they were. This has a name in psychology too. It's sometimes called imposter syndrome, and it's the strange mirror image of overconfidence. The most capable people often carry the most private doubt, precisely because true expertise reveals just how much complexity exists underneath the surface of any subject. This pattern shows up far beyond logic tests and grammar quizzes. In the 1980s, psychologist Ola Svensson asked drivers to rate their own skill compared to other drivers on the road. Something almost comical happened. The vast majority, in some groups over 90%, rated themselves as above average. Mathematically, that's impossible. Half of any group has to be below the midpoint. Yet almost nobody believed they belonged there. This effect has a name of its own. Researchers call it illusory superiority, and it shows up almost everywhere humans are asked to judge themselves against a group. People rate their own leadership skills, their own sense of humor, even their own morality as above average, far more often than statistics could ever allow. Why would evolution build a brain this generous toward itself? One answer comes from a surprisingly practical place. In small ancestral groups, confidence wasn't just a feeling. It was a signal, broadcast to everyone around you, about your fitness to lead a hunt, defend the group, or make a difficult call under pressure. A slightly inflated sense of your own ability may have helped convince others to follow you, even in moments when hesitation might have gotten everyone killed. In other words, overconfidence might not be a bug at all. It might be a feature that once kept small human groups moving forward, instead of frozen in endless self-doubt. But that same feature, built for a world of spears and campfires, now gets applied to subjects like vaccine science, investment strategy, and geopolitics, where confidence untethered from actual competence can do real damage at a much larger scale. Picture two people standing at the edge of the same mountain. One has never climbed anything. From where they stand, the peak looks close, the path looks obvious, and the whole thing looks easy. The other has climbed dozens of similar mountains. They can see the false summits. They know how the weather changes without warning halfway up. They understand exactly how much they don't know about this particular climb. Confidence, in other words, often peaks right before real understanding begins. And it often dips lowest exactly when someone finally sees the mountain for what it truly is. Psychologist Philip Tetlock's decades of research on expert political forecasters found something that echoes this pattern almost perfectly. The most publicly confident pundits, the ones making bold, simple predictions on television, were often measurably worse forecasters than quieter experts who hedged, qualified, and admitted uncertainty. Certainty, it turned out, wasn't a sign of accuracy. Sometimes it was almost the opposite. Here's the twist almost nobody expects. You are not immune to this. Nobody is. The Dunning-Kruger effect doesn't target unintelligent people specifically. It targets anyone standing in the early, shallow end of a subject they haven't yet explored deeply enough to see its true size. You have probably felt completely confident about something you later realized you barely understood. Everyone has. That first flush of confidence, right after learning just enough to sound informed, is one of the most universal experiences in human cognition. It isn't stupidity. It's simply what the beginning of learning feels like from the inside, before enough evidence has arrived to correct the picture. The danger isn't feeling confident. The danger is stopping there. Cognitive scientists have found a strikingly simple antidote to this blind spot, and it isn't more intelligence. It's exposure to disagreement. When people are shown just how much genuine experts disagree with each other on complex topics, their own confidence tends to shrink towards something more accurate. Confidence, it turns out, often grows in isolation and shrinks in the presence of real complexity. Your ancestors got this correction constantly, almost by accident, simply by living shoulder to shoulder with people who would openly challenge a bad idea before it caused real damage. Disagreement wasn't rude. It was how the group stayed alive. Today, many of the environments you move through are engineered to do the opposite. Algorithms show you more of what you already believe. Social feedback rewards certainty over nuance, because a confident claim spreads faster than a careful one. The digital world has quietly rebuilt itself into a machine for amplifying the very blind spot your brain was never designed to defend against. There's another layer to this worth sitting with, one that has nothing to do with individual people at all. Groups can fall into the exact same trap. When a team of people who each know a little agree loudly with each other, their shared confidence can spiral upward, even as their collective accuracy stays flat or even falls. Psychologists call a version of this groupthink, and it thrives in exactly the conditions modern life keeps producing. Comment sections, group chats, echo chambers built from algorithms that quietly filter out disagreement before it ever reaches you. A single overconfident voice is a minor risk. A room full of them, nodding along in agreement, can convince an entire organization or an entire online crowd that a shaky idea is actually a certainty. This is partly why some of history's most careful thinkers built disagreement directly into their process, rather than waiting for it to arrive by accident. Scientific peer review exists largely for this reason. Before a claim is trusted, it has to survive contact with people whose entire job is to find its weak points. It's an artificial version of the ancestral feedback loop your brain used to get for free, rebuilt deliberately because the natural version quietly disappeared. Without something like it, confidence simply expands to fill whatever space silence gives it. So the next time you meet someone who talks over the expert in the room, who explains your job back to you with total certainty, try holding two thoughts at once. The first is compassion. That person isn't broken. They're standing exactly where every human being stands at the edge of a subject they haven't fully entered yet. Their brain is doing precisely what brains have always done in the absence of a feedback loop sharp enough to correct it. The second is a quiet check on yourself. Somewhere right now, in some corner of your own thinking, you are probably standing at that same edge without knowing it. Not because you're careless, because that's simply what the early stage of understanding feels like from the inside. You've met this person before, loud and certain in a room full of quiet expertise. But maybe the real answer isn't that they're stupid at all. Maybe they're simply standing exactly where you once stood, and exactly where you're standing again right now, in some subject you haven't yet learned enough about to doubt yourself. Thank you for spending your time here with Psych Mind Inc. Subscribe and turn on notifications so we can keep pulling apart the hidden machinery of the mind together. Goodbye, and see you next time.